Mike, there's been a lot of talk in our country about, they've made it political, like ESG is bad.
Right.
You know, um,
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy
I'm
debate, isn't it?
wondering, are you? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't get it. Frankly,
Mm,
I don't know. I don't know if it's because they don't want people making better decisions. I think companies. What occurs to me is that companies have customers. Let's say your typical B2C, right?
yeah,
And those customers demand certain things of their clients. I mean, there's companies I will not patronize
sure. Yep,
because of how they do business or who they do business with.
sure thing. I agree.
And, and I think the smart companies are the ones that are saying, what, this is a majority of our customers, we should probably be paying attention to this. And then, some idiot in politics makes it a political issue.
Right.
Are you experiencing that in Canada as well? And where does most of your business come from?
Yeah.
When you and
So,
I know you
yeah,
said your partner's in London, but
good to
are you
ask
doing
that.
most of your
Yeah.
business in Canada over here? Yeah.
Yeah. So we serve clients in the US. We serve them from here, but we support a number of clients
Mm-hmm.
in the US. We have clients across Canada. And then from
Mm-hmm.
London, we serve clients in Europe and in Scandinavia. So we're
Right.
sort of across the
Right. Right.
English speaking world for the most part. Um, we're not finding the arguments about ESG to be as vehement here in Canada, but we're probably catching
Yeah.
up.
Doesn't surprise me.
Some of
Yeah.
the framing and positioning of
Mm-hmm.
ESG has been it's sort of set up in opposition to the old Chicago school of thought from Milton Friedman from the 70s and 80s, where a group of people just felt that the role of the business was to provide profits to the shareholder. And then it was the shareholders'
Yeah.
sort of social obligation to go and do good with that money, right? So philanthropy wasn't ignored, but it wasn't the
Mm-hmm.
business's responsibility. So there's this curious dichotomy between profit making and philanthropy, and I think the world's more complicated than
Yes,
that, and I think most people agree.
I agree.
So we've got,
Mm-hmm.
there's a fantastic academic woman called Dr. Victoria Hirth who works out of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And she's been talking a lot about social purpose businesses and establishing standards for how we actually define what a social
Mm-hmm.
purpose business is. And she said in a talk a couple of months ago that there's three ways that companies react to the climate crisis. The first type puts their head in the sand, just pretends it's not happening, and continues
Pretend it's
doing
not over
business as
there. Yeah.
usual.
Right. Yeah.
Right? We can name a bunch of those
Mm-hmm.
companies. We know who those are. They're probably the ones that you won't shop with. They're
Yes.
the ones that I won't shop with.
Yep.
But there's something rational about that, right? They're just going to kick the can. They're going to wait till the regulators tell them to do different. And that's unfortunate because there's evidence
Mm-hmm.
that the second and third group of companies are performing better. So the second group of companies she frames as those with enlightened self-interest. So they're recognizing that through the operations of their business, they're having negative side effects, right? So they may be generating a profit for shareholders, but they might have an outsized environmental footprint. They're spewing more carbon, they're using more water,
Mm-hmm.
they're producing more waste, or they might have negative social impacts, right? They may be reliant on really cheap labor. They may be they may not be sourcing labor from the community where their customers are, right? Um, so how so those companies sort of notice that there's probably some things we could be doing for the community where we have our head office. Maybe we should take responsibility for some of
Mm-hmm.
those things and kind of hold off the PR critique that we might get. Maybe we should be hiring more diversely so that we can hold off the HR risk that we're exposed to. Maybe we should be thinking a little bit more about our supply chains so we can hold off the customer risk that might be in there. So they're taking
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for risks that are pretty foreseeable based on the negative footprint that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think those are
Mm-hmm.
the ESG
Mm-hmm.
companies for the most part. There's lots of really good companies that are working hard on sustainability. They're thinking about their environmental
Mm-hmm.
footprint. They're making decisions well, paying attention to their social impacts. And there's evidence that those companies perform better. And then the third type of company is what she calls the social purpose company. And these are companies that they recognize that they have negative impacts, but they're determined to use the business as to contribute to positive solutions to bigger issues, right? So, as she defines the social purpose
Mhm.
company, it is a company that makes an optimal strategic contribution to the long term well being of people and planet. So, optimal meaning it's optimized for the size and capacity of the organization. We don't expect one company to
Right.
solve climate change. Strategic in that it's
Right.
embedded in the most senior decision making and the design of the enterprise. And contribution, recognizing that if every organization contributes, then maybe we can solve for some of these big issues. But it's contributing to long term well being. And those are the social purpose companies. And
Mhm.
again, there is evidence that those outperform their peers in their industry. But there's also something like 45% of consumers now consider themselves to be purpose driven. And they're making their consumption choices based on the reputations of the businesses that they're buying from. So, like you, they're
Mhm.
looking away from some brands and towards the brands that are exhibiting better behaviors. And then, of course, we run into the issue of greenwashing. So there's a lots of accusations, and we see it every day in the news that companies are saying one thing, but they're over exaggerating the climate impact. So they're over exaggerating their
Mm.
sustainability performance and their
Yes.
social impacts.
Yeah.
And I
Carbon
I think there
offsets.
are companies that kind of do that on purpose, but I think they're few and far
Yeah.
between. I think more often it's really ambitious leaders that want to do something impactful, and they're maybe talking about the things that they aspire to do rather than the things they actually have done. I think a lot of
Yeah.
greenwashing happens by accident. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a problem, because that makes it really easy for critics that
Mhm.
don't like ESG to point the finger at those that are greenwashing. So we have to manage that,
Mhm.
but I think most of it happens by accident. I think
Mhm.
companies are largely well intended, and I think even in the
Mhm.
bad companies, if we can call them that, there are good people that are just stuck in broken systems and
Of
they're trying to
course.
do good things.
Yeah.
So sometimes we want to work with
Yeah.
those, the intrapreneur that's trying to make things better.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I really feel like there was a bunch of stock I inherited from my father when he passed, and a lot of it was just, I mean, like, Philip Morris. I'm like,
Sure.
really? Do I need stock in a company that's killing people?
Right.
So there were other things, and sat down with my broker and I said, we have to get rid of all this. I said, there has to be a place to put this money, with companies that aren't killing people and
What?
destroying the
And did
environment.
you find it? Were you able to work with your broker and find the right
Yeah,
places?
he was. I mean, they don't just do, they don't just do, your typical, wealth management stuff. They do, he says we couldn't survive if we didn't do impact
Right.
investing for our clients. They
Right.
demand it,
Yeah, and I think that's increasing. Right.
right? But that
Right.
generation didn't. He didn't care. He just cared that, he was making all this money off of his stock.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's got to be. I mean, I think he sold everything but one thing. One thing he
Right.
made me keep for a while. I don't remember
Yeah.
what it was, but well, I mean, I'm sure eventually I'll get rid of it.
Yeah, you imply something interesting there
Um,
that I think is a generational shift in thinking. So, my
mhm.
parents'
Yes.
generation sounds like your parents' generation. Um, they worked 9 to 5, and then they gave back 5 to 9, right? And giving back was the framing that they used, right? I've taken my piece, I've
Yeah.
taken my wealth through my hard effort. Thank you very much. I worked very hard through my career, but now that I've accumulated this excess, I'm
Hmm.
going to give back, and that's what philanthropy looked
Yeah.
like. But today, um,
Hmm.
I think as a Gen Xer, I'm in between these two worlds. But the millennials that I'm friends with and that I see getting into
Hmm.
management roles now, they see the world
Hmm.
differently. Like, why would you work 9 to 5 and then give back 5 to 9? Why wouldn't you blend them? Why wouldn't you build a purposeful
Yes.
career that is
Yeah.
more meaningful and makes a meaningful contribution in the
Yeah.
community? So they're insistent about
Yeah.
colliding those things and integrating those things.
Hmm.
And they think about there's a
Yeah.
bank here that does that for years was using the sort of catch line on their ads. Do you know where your money sleeps at night? So when you've put your deposits in the bank, how is that money being invested? And is your bank or credit
Right.
union investing it in a place where you'd like to see your money go to work, or are they investing it in places that you would
That's
never
right.
buy from?
Carol Schultz here. Thanks for watching this excerpt from Authentically Successful. The conversation doesn't end there. So if you want to hear this episode in full and all my conversations with many other successful founders and CEOs,
please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast.